received around $60,000 in donations through a subsidiary of a Singapore-based company, Persol Kelly, of donations when at the same time this company had been awarded an $86 million contract for the conduct of the 2025 and the 2029 state election. Something that was not disclosed to the Parliament during budget estimates, something that was unknown until we've seen the absolute schmozzle that has been played out over the election this year. My inbox is absolutely full of complaints. In fact, it is overfull and now bouncing complaints back from people who have been disenfranchised, people who have worked in the system for years, worked in many elections, who have never seen such a poorly run election in the past. We have an electoral commissioner, West Australian Electoral Commissioner, who has outsourced his job. Now, the people of Western Australia deserve to know that their electoral system has one of integrity and that they must have absolute trust in the system. And what we're seeing is that trust has not been paid respect to, and we're seeing many examples where people have been denied the right to vote, have been wrongly informed about how to vote, and we're seeing staff who have been under-resourced or under-trained, and polling booths where people are being turned away because there simply wasn't enough ballot papers at the polling booth. This is an absolute shit show. This actually is terrible, and it is a threat to our democracy. We've heard Labor MPs. I was listening to Kate Dowse this morning on the radio. No John Kerry's come out. Where is the Premier in this? We need to see Robert Kennedy stood aside, and we need a full and independent review of what the hell is going on in the West Australian Electoral Commission. $86 million. That is an enormous amount of money, which is not reflected in the budget. It's not reflected in anything that's been disclosed to the Parliament, and it's absolutely incompetent of this electoral commissioner to have outsourced both the training, the employment and the conduct of this election in the ballot papers, in the ballot booths. This is, I think, something which is a scandal. Make it clear, I know that the West Australian Labor government has been returned, but there are many seats which will now, I'm sure, go to the Court of Disputed Return because of the known situation, the fact that people have been denied the right to vote, the fact that people have been wrongly informed as to how to vote. This is something which goes to the very heart of our democracy, and it needs to be investigated by a full committee of this Parliament to understand exactly what has gone wrong and to make recommendations so that this cannot happen again. We cannot allow this to happen in 2029 because we know that in 2025 our democracy has been wounded by the actions of the government in accepting this tender from a foreign company to run our election. Happy to take any questions.
You say your inbox is full. What have been some of the most shocking reports that you've heard?
Oh, look, I've heard of whole busloads of people who have been turned away from a booth, a whole busload in the Pilbara, because they didn't have any absent votes at the booth to actually handle it, or had no role to handle it. I've heard of other examples where electorate staff have wrongly informed people as to how to vote below the line on their ticket, which means that their vote will be informal, when in fact they were told that they could number up to 20 below the line instead of number 20 at least below the line. These are the type of examples we've heard. We've heard other examples where people have been told on the upper house ticket to only put one in a box. They cannot put any other numbers, which is wrong. This has actually led to an outcome which I think will affect many of the elections that we see around the state. Now, we have the court system which can look into that, but we should not be allowing an electoral system to throw up so many issues and so many problems as we've seen in this election. And these are reports which are coming in from all over the state. And so where you have those tightly held contests, like the ones that have not yet been declared, like Pilbara, Kalgoorlie, Albany, the one in Fremantle, which is going backwards and forwards with the government minister. These are matters which could fundamentally change the result of those elections. So although it doesn't change the fact that the majority of parliamentarians will be Labor members and that the government will be a Labor government, it could materially affect whether or not the Minister for Water is returned to Parliament. And that is actually, I think, something which is a damning indictment on the conduct of this election by the Electoral Commissioner, and I'm calling for him to be stood aside.
Do you have a count of the number of people who have come through your inbox saying, I couldn't vote?
I haven't got the number with me, but we had 80 such inquiries within an hour of putting a post up on Facebook asking for people to get in touch. 80 in an hour just for people who actually saw my post on Facebook. So that's a pretty, damning number. But what is most serious is that many of those emails are from people who have worked in the booths, people who have outlined the issues they've had working in the booths, and some of these people have worked in many elections before and have never seen anything like what they're seeing in this particular conduct of this election. In terms of provision of resources, the number of roles that are available for the booth staff to go through, all of these things, which are actually not just, as Kennedy has claimed, around the recruitment, but also around the conduct of the election. To be the Electoral Commissioner is a very important role. It's not something where you just say, oh, well, we'll hand that over to someone else to do. Let some company from Singapore run our elections. No. The people of Western Australia deserve to know that their election system is one of complete integrity and it's being run by an independent body, not some foreign multinational from Singapore.
Now, the donations that you're talking about are from companies that have Australian ABNs, and that seems to fit within the law. So do you think the law needs to change around this?
I think it's not very... the law is not very effective if you have a completely owned subsidiary based in Australia which can donate on your behalf when the money is coming in from overseas and when the money is being awarded for that contract to that company for $86 million. I think we need more transparency than that in the future, and we need a better system to reject donations of that type.
Have you heard anything back from the
Sorry.
Have you heard anything back from the Triple yet?
No.
Given the contract has been issued by an independent body, so rather than a government answers to a minister, this is a standalone body, should there be a ban on all donations to political parties from groups that want to tender for those contracts? Is that an option?
I think it's something that we need to look at, and if you look at the situation in other states where, for instance, developers are not allowed to contribute to political parties because they're waiting on a ministerial decision, that is very similar to this situation where the awarding this contract by the Department of Finance is clearly a decision of executive government. The executive government, which is a Labor Party, which was the beneficiaries of a very large donation from that company, or a series of donations which totaled $60,000.
Kelly had a lot of other government contracts. Do you think they need to be looked at?
This particular contract is about something which I think all West Australians would think would be conducted by a public body, and that is their election. It's one thing to actually ask for some assistance, but it's another thing to outsource the running of the whole process, which seems to be what's happened in this regard. Now, other issues that I've heard mentioned are such that we've heard of circumstances where on the radio this morning, a Labor MP saying that scrutineers were being asked to help with the count. I mean, honestly, what could be more fundamentally wrong than that? I think the Commissioner should actually resign, but if he's not going to resign, he should be stood aside. We need to have a full inquiry into the conduct of this election. We need to make sure that in 2029 these mistakes are not made again, and we need to assure West Australians that their democracy is safeguarded by an independent, publicly funded organisation which will conduct the election in 2029.
Do you think the subsidiary should be able to go through and assist with the 2029 election, or do you think it should be scrapped?
I think it should be scrapped. We can't accept this process, and I don't think West Australians will accept this process. I don't think West Australians, certainly members of Parliament, we sat through budget estimates. This was not revealed in the budget estimates this year, that this contract was being awarded, that there was actually a contract which went beyond all of the money which has been appropriated for the Electoral Commission in the current budget. And so I don't think that this passes any sort of test of probity, and it cannot be allowed to stand, and we cannot see this contract continue through to 2029. This has to be broken, and in my view, there's a lot of questions that have to be asked of the Electoral Commissioner, but also of the Attorney General and the other members of government who oversaw this contract. Unfortunately, the Attorney General and the former Minister for Finance, I understand, are not going to be long in the government, both retiring, but we need to know what has happened and how this has come about.
Would you expect them to front up to a parliamentary inquiry?
Yes.
Government agencies sign contracts all the time. Is it that unusual that we didn't hear about this particular one?
Yes, because it's actually a fundamental attribute of our democracy that there's a public body which conducts the elections, which people trust. That's why we have the Electoral Commission. That's why they're there. If they don't want to do their job, that's fine. We'll find other people that can do their job within that organisation.
When did you find out Russell Kelly had the contract?
We knew that there had been outsourcing because of the complaints that were coming in. This only became aware to me a few days before the election, when people were saying, well, we've been asked to go here to Town Y to train with this company. They're running the recruitment and conduct of the election. So what was revealed to me was that the training was particularly poor and inadequate. The people, when they went to apply for their jobs, were asked a lot of questions which were relevant to mining companies and truck driving jobs, not to running electorate offices. This is a system which has absolutely let West Australians down. This is a decision of government and the Electoral Commissioner which has fundamentally let Western Australians down at this election. And I feel for those people who tried to express their democratic vote at the election and were turned away, or were misguided in their ballot in the marking of their ballot because they were wrongly informed at the booth about how to do it, and the vote presumably will be informal. It's actually disgraceful. I cannot think of anything in the entire time that I've been involved in political life that has been so fundamentally inappropriate in terms of the conduct of our democracy. All of the things we've seen in this last parliament, where parliament's processes have been thwarted, etc., none of it meets the test of what we've seen on Saturday. It's an absolute disgrace.
And your party also received.
Hang on.
Your party also received a small donation from.
Yes,
Russell Kelly.
and we declared that, and I would point out that we are not in executive government. We are not the people who are making decisions as to whether or not to award an $86 million contract to this company, and we were not even aware that the contract had been awarded. So there's a difference between being the executive, who are in government making these decisions, and accepting these donations, and being simply a parliamentary party who is discussing publicly the issues but are not actually making those decisions.
Isn't it a bit cheeky though to say they can't donate money to Labor but they can donate money to the opposition? Shouldn't it
Well,
just be
as I say, they've accepted $60,000 from a company which they have awarded an $86 million contract to. $60,000 is a pretty substantial donation. $86 million is a pretty substantial contract. And I think that there's a level of probity there that goes with that that is far beyond acceptable to not be investigated.
I'm not disagreeing with that, but surely the rule should be blanket across all political parties, given you could have formed government after the election. Isn't that a strange looking?
Well, it could have formed government after the election, but the decision was made before the election. The decision was made by the ALP while they were receiving $60,000 from that company, and that's what's wrong.
Have you considered returning the donation to Russell Kelly?
I actually contacted our state director to find out what had been received, and that we found that there had been a donation, which I have disclosed. And I've asked the state director to look at whether or not that's appropriate for us to retain that money.
Just on some of the issues from the weekend, have you had anyone that's come to you that went to a polling booth and were told they weren't on the electoral roll?
Yes, I've had people who were turned away because they didn't have a driver's licence. I know of other people who were turned away because their name wasn't on the roll, and they've been on the roll for years, and somehow it just dropped off.
Did you say how many?
Look, I don't know how many, but I know that at least one booth I know of where everybody was asked to produce their driver's licence before they could vote. So presumably a lot of people were turned away. This is the type of situation that we've seen unfolded across the area. Just in my own electorate, I know of a booth where the presiding officer was rung an hour or two before the election started to say, we haven't got a presiding officer, will you do the job? No training, just rock up and do it. That's the level of incompetence that we've seen at this election. And this cannot go unaddressed. This actually, in some of those key electorates that are closely contested, this could materially affect the outcome, or could and already has materially affected the outcome of some of those elections, in my view.
But does it have a substantial effect on the election results?
Yes, in some elections. In some electorates it will have. If you've got if you've got an outcome which is hinged on a few hundred votes, or a preference flow which is determined on a handful of votes as to who is who's excluded and who's in, these could actually materially affect the election. And this is something which goes to the heart of the problem. We actually need to have people who are properly trained, who understand the system, and who have the integrity of the system at heart. Not some company which is purely looking at how it can make the next dollar for its shareholders. That is not what is required in the conduct of an election.
Will you be challenging any results in seats where Nationals might fall short? Is that an option you're considering?
There are processes which are laid out in the Act for the Court of Disputed Returns, and I would imagine that many parties will be considering actions in any of those tightly controlled, tightly contested seats.
Is the National Party one of those parties?
Look, I'm not aware. Let's see what happens there. That's up to the Labor Party, not up to me as a former candidate, now a newly elected member. But I'm sure the party will be looking at any of the seats where it's close, and to see if there are irregularities which may have affected the outcome of that poll.
Should the WAEC release the seats that are affected or that may have been affected?
Look, there's the first reports we heard from this were from Fremantle, but I've had reports from many seats across the state, many seats. So it's not really possible to list them all. Let's just say that most seats appear to have had problems within them. But if the seat was clearly won, by a 20% margin or something, well, I don't think there's any argument over the result. But if you're coming down to a seat which is won by 150 votes, that's where this becomes fundamentally important to the outcome, and it really does threaten our democracy when we don't have a electoral commission which is doing its job properly.
I'm moving on. The shark attack off the coast of Esperance. What more needs to be done in Esperance to protect not only locals but tourists?
Look, I think my colleague Peter Rundle made some comment around that incident yesterday. I think we've seen a number of shark attacks in the Esperance area, and I think it's something which obviously we all would like to see avoided. Ultimately, it's up to people to make the decision as to whether or not they venture into the water. I don't think that anybody is calling for there to be a hunt for sharks or the like in the Esperance area, but people need to be very aware that there are sharks in that vicinity, and I think we need to perhaps look at what monitoring we can do to ensure that people are better informed if there is a known threat in the area. But ultimately, it's a very sad thing that's occurred in Esperance. There's been a number of shark attacks which have occurred in that area. I just have all the concern for the family of the person who's been attacked by the shark, but I understand that many people continue to wish to surf and to use those waters. I just ask that they provide that they use caution when they do so.
Community groups though have been asking for years for more to be done. You're saying you've not heard of any calls necessarily to reinstate a shark hole or something, but it's Australia, WA, we've got some of the best beaches in the whole world, saying people should maybe think about going into the water as perhaps not really a solution. Do you think that more could be done? Safety nets?
Well, I think that we have systems in place in the Perth metropolitan area where when the beaches are being used, there are monitors out looking for sharks. I don't know if something can be done to enable that to occur in Esperance, whether the population of people down there is such that you could justify such a regime, and maybe there's other ways we could keep an eye on the shark situation in the area. It is ultimately something where we choose to interact with the marine environment, and we know that there are sharks in the water. When I go into the beach and have a swim, I'm making that conscious decision that, well, there might be a shark there. So I think people are aware of that, and they still choose to swim. It's a difficult one because if you're surfing, you can't really have a net or something. Like a swimming beach is different. So surfers do take that risk. I think most are accepting of that risk and don't really want to see wholesale culls or anything like that of the marine environment.
Shane, are you able to make a comment on the political donations made by CBH Group?
Sorry?
Are you able to make a comment on the political donations that were made by CBH Group? Is it fair that the growers had a political decision made for them?
Oh, well, I've heard that a lot of growers are a bit miffed at the level of contribution the CBH made to the Labor Party and the puny contribution they made to the National Party. So many of them being National Party members and contributors were surprised to see that as the result of the disclosures. So I just urge CBH to have in mind which party is actually arguing for the matters that concern their growers the most.
NRL relations today, people are saying that Colour Deal was difficult not to speak about it during the election campaign, and it's got to be done quickly. Do you have concerns about how that's going to play out?
Looks like there's a bit of a deal being done there, doesn't it? Some sort of a underhand deal where there'll be some level of funding to assist the change without there being a dollar spent directly to the NRL. I'm sure the Premier is not going to give a dollar to the NRL, but he certainly looks like he's willing to give dollars towards the shift.
Is that concerning that he wasn't more?
Very concerning. Very concerning. And again, a bit like Mark McGowan saying that electoral reform is not on the agenda. In 2021, we have Project saying that NRL spending is not on the agenda in 2025 when it seems it really is.